Mark-up. Ms. Loxley would like to make a comment. We can't hear you.
Councillor Oxley, as you look on the bottom left of your screen and the small arrow next to your microphone, do you have the option to change which microphone you're using at all? So, I mean, for example, I have the option to change between my headset and my laptop's microphone. So if one of your microphones is occupied, one of the other ones might. Oh, yeah, there we go. We can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. I don't have to kill myself.
Okay. Who did you nominate for vice chair?
You, Gordon.
Thank you, Mark. Right. We're talking about, as you probably heard, we're talking about the work plan. Have you any comments on the work plan, Mark?
No.
None. Can I, Paul, any comments? No. Okay. Can I just make a couple of comments? If I look at it on the invitation for the 6th of July, we've got actually an invitation for a physical meeting, not a virtual meeting. If you look at the calendar.
Yep, thank you, Chair. We have had a request for that meeting date to be moved anyway, so we can consult with the committee and then tidy up that error in the invite in any event.
Right. The next one I've got is on the 16th of November. There appears to be a clash between the local plan meeting and the Constitution Commission meeting, and there'll be at least 3 of us from this meeting at that local plan meeting at the same time. That's according to my diary. I may be wrong.
Yes, I think this is just a case of left hand and right hand with regard to the organisation of those meetings, but we'll get that tidied up. Okay,
so that's that. Yeah, that's all I had. Fine. So everyone's happy with that as it sits now, and we note the addition of overview and scrutiny at the end of the programme on a date to be decided.
I've stuck my hand up again, Gordon.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you. I don't have any objections to our meetings that are not public meetings being virtual, because if things go wrong, we just wait and just put up with it. I do think it looks highly unprofessional if we had any public watching in, though. And as I think, is it just 2 meetings a year are in public, if memory serves? If that's the case, can we not have our public meetings in the council chamber, and at least that way the public see us, if they choose to come, operating professionally? Tom, I think, has got his hand up.
Oh, sorry, I was just fiddling with my pen, but yes, the 11th of our in-person our formal meeting on the 11th of January is already scheduled to be an in-person meeting, okay, which is our second formal meeting of the year.
Thank you.
Yep, in this case. Okay, right, thank you. So we may come back to the work plan later, just in case there's anything we want to add or amend. Item 8, the flag policy is the next item on the agenda. That's been circulated. Other comments on the flag policy? Any detailed comments?
Chair, just to briefly introduce the item,
yes,
you'll recall there was a debate at council about flying the Ukraine flag.
Yep.
And we don't have a written policy about flying the flags. And I think it does help your officers if members could sign up to this. So then we're clear when we can fly the Union Jack and the county and the rest of it. So it's something and nothing. I mean, flag flying can be very, very important to the local community. It's important to get these things right. And there's a lot of government guidance and protocol associated with it, which we've stitched into the policy as well. And this, if you're happy with it here, I think we should take it on to full council
right.
to be
okay,
approved.
well, let's talk through it, and then we can decide the approach after we've made various comments. So Councillor Wallace first on the list.
Thank you. I have a number of detailed points pertaining to grammar mainly that I will send through to the governance team, because if this is a public facing document, it's got to be absolutely correct. But I do have a couple of general questions as well. I mean, in principle, I don't have any problems with it, but what's our civic office? I've not come across that term in my 11 years as a councillor.
So go on, Tom, you go then.
This is effectively our civic officer, Kate Howarth, and just Kate under my supervision, and then line managed by Angela, and also the chief executive. Civic office is just a term to describe the team or individuals that deal with civic functions at the council.
Yeah, I am not sure that our public will recognise that as a term. And I'm not even sure it's necessarily necessary at the points it's mentioned. So I might think of some suggestions when I send in my detailed
We could
stuff.
simply amend to governance team.
Yeah, our public have heard of governance, and I think that would be easier. Thank you. My second one on it was, is NHS Day going to be permanent, or or is this just something that arose out of COVID? And ditto Emergency Workers Day, and what's their flag, by the way? Because if it's something that isn't permanently in the national calendar, as it were, then I don't think we should be including it. I think we should have a catch-all for things like that come along, but not name them if they're not going to be there forever. Because I can envisage a situation in a few years' time where we have a National Teachers' Day, and then that'll fizzle out as well. So could we put some more thought into that? Then in paragraph 5.5, and this is a discussion point, I think, the requests are going to be assessed by 2 of the officers and the leader of the council. I actually think it should be the chairman, because we're talking about civic things rather than political things. So that was on that one. Oh, I think that's the end of my comments on this paper. Thank
Okay.
you, Chairman.
Thank you. Do you want to comment on Councillor Waller's point, particularly on the paragraph 4.2 and paragraph 5.4?
I think we could certainly add a form of caveat in around the additional flag flying days at 4.2 and just say these will be kept under review, and that can be with the same consultation as we have throughout the policy. And I'm sure we can amend to the chairman rather than the leader. It's mostly as the leader is also the relevant portfolio holder for a lot of the day-to-day activities of the relevant teams.
I'm
So I'm sure
quite
we can put the
happy for it
chairman in.
in consultation with the leader, but I do think the chairman needs to be there as the civic head.
Thoughts from Councillor Oxley, Councillor Brown?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Just to say, it does actually say the council often requests to fly flags at Catmas, and the policy provides a clear protocol, and it's implemented by the civic office, which is governance, as we're going to change it to, under instruction from the chief exec or director of law and governance. And perhaps we could have that in consultation, yeah, with the chairman, rather than, because I think we do need to include, and I take on board all the comments that Councillor Waller has said. The reason that we have this flag flying, or we're being asked to look at this flag flying policy, is because we didn't have actually a flag flying policy, and we were asked to show some support specifically for what's happening in the Ukraine, and that highlighted the fact that we didn't have a flag flying policy. So I do welcome this initiative, during the debate, I seem to remember that we do have certain issues with regards to, whilst we do have 2 flag poles outside Catmas, there are protocols they're really there with regards to royal events. So, for example, if the Queen or the King passes, then and there are events which happen nationally, then the flag is lowered. And I think there's also that element when it comes to people who are well known within the wider community in Rutland. So it was actually, we did actually go outside of that remit when we asked to fly the flag of a foreign nation from our flagpole. So I do welcome this. I was a little bit disappointed when it came to there was a little bit of confusion as to the nomination, well, of the proposition, I should say, at the agenda item, where we had 2 people seconding it, where we had the leader of the council proposing it, and then 2 group leaders seconding it. I think it would have been easier if we could have had an arrangement or an agreement where a particular, because it must have looked a bit strange for 2 people to be seconding it, and I think the chairman of the council was particularly confused. So I don't know if that's written in the protocols as to the modus operandi of flying the flag.
Well, now,
Mary,
now
would you like to come back on that point?
I mean, I agree. It was a bit confusing, but in the end, the chairman ruled that he would accept the 2 seconders because we wanted the cross-party support for the resolution. But now we've got the policy. It will be a decision then for the chairman with the chief executive.
Okay.
If a request comes in for a flag, the flag to be flown, and they can decide. So we won't need to have to go through the formality of a debate.
And presumably that means that the decision will actually just be relayed to full council.
Yes.
That it's been taken.
Yes. I mean, yes. I mean, and I imagine the chairman will want to be confident that it's fully supported.
Yeah.
That would be the check.
Yeah.
There. Yes.
Because we wouldn't want to fly the Argentinian flag when Eva Peron died, for example.
No. No.
So there would have to be some sort of process which would enable members to be alerted to the fact that the decision had been taken.
Oh, yes.
So there
yes.
could be some input behind the
Yes.
scenes from group leaders. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Fine. That's
Yes.
good. Yeah.
Good. Councillor Paul Brown, do you want to make any comment?
I don't think so. I think we have consensus of view here across the board from what has been said, so I'll go along quite happily with that.
There's only one point I've got, and it's more, it's not grammatical, but it's more understanding. It's paragraph 3.3. In reading it first time round, I read that as being, and no non-UK national flags will be flown. Of course, that only relates to when there's a sovereign in the county.
Yeah.
And it's just maybe just clarification at that point, so that people don't pick that up as being, oh, we can't fly non-national flags.
I think the phrase, if we just add in quote marks, the only exception to the Union flag being flown would provide that sort of clarification on the sentence. I see what you mean exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that was the only thing. Otherwise, I was happy with the document, other than the points that have been raised during the discussion. So are we happy that that document now goes forward to whom? Cabinet and Council?
Once amended with all my typo-y type things, please.
I think, so as members will be aware, we've cancelled the June meeting of council, but July council would allow for Councillor Waller's amendments and these amendments to be made. And I think it would be useful for this to come before council, referred on from this committee, so that I mean, the whole point of this policy is to give members more clarity on the process when they want to consider these things in future. So the committee would be able to refer this on to council.
Okay, Councillor Oxley?
I was going to say, I would like to see the typos that Councillor Waller is going to be changing before we actually endorse it. So if it could actually be circulated to members of this committee, and then we could come back and say, yeah, we're happy with that.
Of course.
Yeah.
And July council allows time for that to happen as well.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, fine. Thank you. That's the flag policy resolved. Next item is members development strategy. Who would like to introduce this? Marie?
I'll introduce it. So this report makes 2 recommendations. Firstly, that we have a written member development strategy, and if this group is happy with it, it will go on to council to be approved. And I'm also suggesting that if we do have a strategy, that we have a member group to direct it. And I'm suggesting that this body, the Constitution Commission, because it is cross-party, owns the strategy and is accountable back to the council for the delivery of it. At the moment, there's no written policy about member development, and there's an ad hoc series of events. There are directors' briefings, there are, occasionally code of conduct seminars, but there's no strategic approach to it. And what I'm suggesting in the paper builds on the Local Government Association approach, which says there should be 3 criteria. Firstly, a clear commitment to councillor development and support. Secondly, a strategic approach, and that whatever you do on learning and development, that it's effective in building councillor capacity. And I'm suggesting that for the current year, these should be the priorities. So developing leadership capability, recognising that you've got all-out elections next year, and what we should be doing is making sure we've got a really good induction programme for the new council. Keeping an eye on all the changes in the health sector and how the council's role in that is changing and evolving. There is something, I think, around the COVID-19 pandemic and the running of the council. So, supporting members with, virtual events such as these, and also recognising its impact in the community. Picking up on the corporate strategy, which I think went to Cabinet this week. And then when you're looking at training, being mindful of there's a set of core requirements, but also councillors have different roles and responsibilities, and the training and development needs to reflect that. You need good quality induction arrangements, something around remote communication, remote working, but also having equality of access and making sure that we've got a process to ensure what we're delivering is what members want. So I'm suggesting that the Commission take a lead role on the strategy and have reports on progress. We did consult members in the survey around training and development, and we've also talked to senior officers about the approach. And what you'll find in the papers is a strategy document which reflects what I've just said at more length, and also has a plan for the current year, which doesn't have a lot of things in it, but the focus is mainly around planning committee training, which is mandatory, and also supporting the new scrutiny function. What we'd like to do is, if the council wants to go ahead with this, is that Tom's team would keep an eye on training that's available across the region and nationally, and curate courses so members could be notified of events that are coming along. And so we take a bit more of a strategic approach to it. So that's the proposal. Happy to take questions, Chair.
Comments. I start with Councillor Oxley. He got his hand up first.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I welcome this initiative. I think it's very important that we recognise the fact that new members have a particular role to play, and they need to be brought up to speed as quickly as possible. The statutory duties that we have as far as planning and the like, and given the fact that we have had by-elections, I've lost count of the number of by-elections we've had four by-elections. Okay, we need to allow those new members to be brought in. For example, I myself as a new cabinet member need to be brought up to speed quite quickly, as we have in train a lot of quite large contracts and the like, which I'm now responsible for. So it's vital that all members are able to go to governance and say, what can be done to assist me in this. And so new members, when they come along, they have to be shown how to signposted to all the different areas that they will be asked to be responsible for or have training in place for. So, and I think we only have a small amount of money for training. I think £300, was it?
Yes.
So that does tend to limit what can actually be used. Is that on an annual basis, or and is it carried forward if we don't use it?
I should say that this is something a bit more in the nitty-gritty of the way that services put in their bids, but I do tend to put in a bigger bid for next year's training budget, because we've got our 2023 induction to think about as well. So 300 is the budget we have for this year, but it's certainly not our intention to have that budget for next year.
Okay.
And obviously, but there's a separate process that officers go through with regard to carry forwards and underspends. And it's probably worth saying at this point that we've got a small underspend on other areas of the governance budget with regard to our allowances for scrutiny chairs, because we only have one scrutiny chair now. And so there is support for a small vehemence if needed to cover extra training for the scrutiny function and support if needed, but not the full amount of that saving. So there is some flexibility within this year to do what we need to do, and obviously we have to meet our statutory duties. If for whatever reason we have to end up running 3 sets of planning training because council resolves to have more new members on planning, then we'll have to meet that.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I totally agree with all that. Take all that on board. As I say, I think my only concern really is that all members who are asked to make a decision at council, at full council or at the planning committee, have the ability to do so. They have received all the training they need to be able to make that decision, and that is critically important. And so, as I say, this document hopefully will go a long way down the road to supporting that. And it's the same with the new scrutiny function. I think we have, as I understand it, looking at my diary, we've got a scrutiny panel June the 9th. And I'm still waiting for notification of when the training is going to take place to allow us to take part in that. So it'll be interesting to see if we, as I say, hopefully all will be in train before June the 9th, but it's a lot to take on board in such a short time.
Mr. Waller.
Sorry, oh, me, sorry. My computer made a noise just as you spoke. I'm really sorry, Gordon, apologies. To answer Mark's question or Mark's comment at the end, the scrutiny session that I spoke to the group leaders about will not be taking place before the first meeting of the new overview and scrutiny committee, simply because the time factor. If we're bringing in external trainers, they have very full diaries and we won't be able to get them in before a fortnight hence, which is when the meeting is. It will happen, but in July, I think it's scheduled for, I saw on the programme that we've been given here. But that wasn't why I put my hand up. I think in paragraph 3.3, the strategic priorities, I think because we've got the new scrutiny way of working, that actually that needs to be there explicitly, and I don't think it's there explicitly. So that's one comment. My second comment is I actually don't agree with officers about COVID-19 and the impact. I don't think we need training on it. I think we've lived it for the last 2 years. What I do think might be valuable having in there, though, is the impact of external factors on the officers and the way the council operates. It would incorporate COVID-19 clearly, but there are going to be other things that are external, like the levelling up agenda, like the adult social care changes, and so on and so forth, that do impact, and they will vary from month to month, year to year. But I think that is worthwhile putting in, because I don't think new members in particular actually have a very good understanding of how our officers work. And I don't mean that in any pejorative sense. I mean, you have a contact with an officer, you see what they do in relation to you, but you don't know what else they're doing behind the scenes. It's a bit like the iceberg, you know, most of it's under the water. And I think we as members, particularly newer members, need to have a much better understanding of how our officers are working for us. And it's becoming more and more necessary, I think, as we are cutting budgets, because the perception in our wards is largely that, you know, there are people sitting around at home with their feet up, not doing anything.
They're not in some wards, not in all wards.
Well,
Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, Mark. Carry on, Gail.
Well, it's certainly some of the social media I picked up, which isn't my ward, as well as some comments within my ward. It's not true, and I defend our officers to the nth degree. But I think we do need better understanding. But it isn't just COVID. That's my point. I think the COVID needs to come out. The spirit behind that one needs to stay. That was my next one. it keeps coming at various points, by the way, the reference to COVID. So it needs, the whole paper will need going through if that's going to be changed. In the actual main document, again, the same points to be made. There was something else, let me find it. Oh yes, in section 7, new members induction, as far as this year is concerned, it will have to be in-house inevitably, but for next year, can we also incorporate East Midlands Council's training? Because following major elections, they do a major training program, and our colleagues who went on it in 2019 seem to find it beneficial. So that's just to raise that. Also, can somebody tell me, please, what a ward walk is? That's also in 7.1 of the main report.
Through you, Chair, very quickly, as I understand it, the Chief Executive regularly meets with members and does a physical walk or drive around the ward with the members.
Yeah, Andrew Brown reported that he went round with the chief exec 2 days ago on a ward walk.
Have you ever done that, Councillor Brown? Paul?
No, it's first I've heard of this.
Well, you haven't been on the council very long. I mean,
Quite.
it took
Quite.
Andrew, I think it took Andrew
this is-
3 years.
This is precisely the point of having training and to know what's going on in the council.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it needs some definition, because I've never had it either, and I've been on the council 11 years, which is why I didn't know what the term meant.
I think,
Okay, we'll
I'd be horrified to walk around my ward. It takes me 2 hours to drive around.
can I just add to that? I think something new that Mark Andrews brought out,
Yeah.
and I think he's done it, I wouldn't say randomly, but it sounds randomly across the county at this point in time. He's done it in Ketton, I do know. He's now done it obviously down in Caldicot. So I think he's working his way around. There's no particular pattern that he's using. So and it is a couple of hours just going around the patch,
May I
understanding the
suggest,
issues.
sorry, Gordon, may I suggest then, if it's part of new member induction, that it's formalised?
Yep, fair point.
I think
If
Tom.
it's in this training document, it should be formalised, because new members should understand that it'll take him at least a year to get around all the wards. He's not going to do it in the first 21 days or 27 days.
Yeah, we do have an internal checklist that we use for members, and I'll make sure that organisation of first ward walk is put onto there. But obviously, members will appreciate that officers' diaries aren't. The chief executive isn't necessarily free to go for a walk around a ward with a week's notice once they know who the individual is. But,
It'll have to be, through you, Chair, it'll have to be programmed.
It will be, absolutely.
Yeah.
And another point in that section on 7.3, well, it might be on the whole thing really. I felt that the emphasis was on what, not on how. And I think we need more training on the how.
Could you
Uh,
possibly explain further what you mean by the how? The
Well-
how, the training, or
No, how you do things,
all right, that's
not what the things are.
Yeah.
You
You
know,
mean more skills based?
yeah. Well, some skills based. I mean, it's a bit of both, isn't it?
skills and capabilities. I think it'll be down as.
And processes as well. You know, who do you ring up? Who do you talk to? How do you find out which person it is? You know, we give everybody, all the councillors, a list of officers, but in induction, we need to say, you think of the service area, you look for who that officer is, that's who you go to, assuming we've got the same process. If we've got a single point of contact by then, obviously it'll be different, but you know, this is who you go to. If you don't get any joy, then you go to so-and-so. Because I find as a group leader that those are the questions I'm answering more than anything else when I've got new members.
Anything else, Councillor Wallace?
Sorry, I was getting myself carried away there thinking about it. I beg your pardon. Oh yes, finally on 10 sorry, no, not finally. On 9.3, I think it's important to add into that national changes,
Yeah.
please. And on the 10.1 at the end, it says this must be approved in advance by the director and their group leader. Well, which director?
It's Angela. The director of legal and governance will be the senior officer on this.
Oh, well, can we say that? Because
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be, I don't know, director of children if you want to go on children-based training or whatever.
I think, Marie, there is actually a reference that if, for example, particularly if a portfolio holder is going on training specific to their portfolio, that is also cleared with the relevant strategic director
Okay.
as well. But yeah, we can clarify that.
Thank you. Right. Thank you, Gail. Next one, I think, is Paul Brown, since Mark's already had a shot. So we'll go for Paul.
Oh, I was going to back up what the Gail said. I mean, I'm pretty new to this game. It's six or 8 months now. But you're given the green folder when you arrive, and that has heads of departments and senior management teams. But constantly I've had to go to Gail or somebody else and say, well, who do I actually contact for this? There is not an up-to-date list of various contacts within, say, on the waste disposal side or something like this. And it would be terribly useful and avoid having to do this if that could be up, the list could be updated and include the more minor people who we would want to have more everyday contact with on everyday matters. May be difficult because I know you people change vastly and change very quickly, but even just if it's within a department, the name of an alternative.
Yeah, I mean,
Can I go back to Tom? Will you give me an answer to that one?
Yeah, specifically, this is the service contacts document that members are given as part of their induction pack. The document is regularly updated, and every time it is updated, it is reshared with members. I mean, as you say, Councillor Brown, we do have a lot of changeover. There will almost every so there are so many departments that someone will have changed over, but that service list does also include a list of the most popular services, and if there are particular services that members feel aren't covered in the service contact list, then they should contact us. I mean, certainly I review it from my perspective to make sure that services have been covered off within it. It is relatively deliberate that it's the senior level officers because those are the appropriate officers to deal with elected members rather than individual officers. The exception might be, for example, with planning, where a case officer has been assigned. And there are also quite a lot of generic email addresses put in there to cover off when an particular officer named in the contact list isn't available. But obviously they will have their own out of offices on as well to name their deputy or someone to deal with their inquiries on their behalf.
Okay.
I do take the point, however, with regard to the big binder that members get. And certainly what I've started trying to do with our more newly elected members is go through that document in a meeting with them and go through each document and make sure that the member is clear on that. And although it isn't written into the documents, Councillor Waller, I do also say, so for example, if you've had this come through, you would contact this person and try and case scenario with them. But I appreciate we could do a bit more work on almost worth including in our pack how to do this, how to do that, with a couple of examples on to help members with clarity. But there's also a lot of paperwork we give a new member already, so we don't want to add that too much.
I didn't have the benefit of your help, Tom, when I came in, but perhaps next one that comes in next time I might join in, and I can go through that with him.
Come back on that, please, Gordon, because it's on my point. It wasn't just that, it was all the house. And induction doesn't have to be done in the first 3 months. It can be done in the first 2 years, but includes things like, how do you do a call-in? How do you ask a question at council? It's all the purely practicals.
That's a very good point. I think I'll come back to that later. So thank you, Tom. I think, are you anything else to say, Paul?
No,
if nobody objects, I'm going to use first names. I think it's much more personal. We don't have any attendees from the external community, so I think we can be more informal in this meeting, if everyone's in agreement with that. Mark, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I found that I was actually mentoring the new members of my group And they came to me first if they had a question, because I think experienced members, those who have been re-elected and who are acting as group leaders, should be the first port of call when it comes to any question that a new member has. And I couldn't see that much reference to mentoring of members by the old guard, if you like, and they have a crucial part to play. And especially, I mean, officers are flat out. We are doing all we can to support officers by taking the pressure off of them as best we can, rather than encouraging them perhaps to drill down into the department and ask a specific question of a specific officer. And I understand that the chief exec is actually producing or putting together a plan to allow a single point of contact. We did have a single point of contact so that elected members can actually go to a particular person who is then tasked with asking the question for them, rather than having 27 people phoning an officer during the day when they've got other things to do with their time, like run the council. So, and I think, as I say, there has to be a little bit more emphasis on mentoring by group leaders for the members of their groups, answering questions and the like.
Mark, that's covered in 8.3
Yeah.
Of the strategy document. I have read it.
Thank you.
Yeah, but as I say, it was just what I was just reacting to what Paul had said about trying to get the specific telephone number of a specific officer so they could ask a specific question. That needs to come really from his group leader, perhaps.
Gail.
Thank you, Gordon. Not all our members are in groups. We have to remember that. And I think the training programme has to be for everybody. And we can't say, well, your group leader should be telling you this when you're not in a group. I think we just have to bear that in mind. We may have totally grouped come May, you know, we may not, we can't predict. But I think that's worth consideration. I think if group leaders are meant to be mentors as opposed to points for information distillation, then we need to have training in being a mentor. I'm perfectly happy to be a point of information. Actually, I've also had quite significant mentoring training, so I'd be prepared to do that. But I'm not doing it at the moment. I am not mentoring my team. I am providing information when they ask and make suggestions when they don't ask, because I'm sure Paul will concur. But the main reason I put my hand up, Gordon, is I do have some comments on the training plan. Do you want to take these now or in a moment?
Can we take them in a moment? Because I also have comments on the training plan as well.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll give you some comments on the main strategy in a moment. Tom.
I was just going to say, to give assurance that we do offer non-aligned members a bit, well, not extra support, but we do make it clear to non-aligned members that because we know they haven't got a group to go to, that they can come to the governance team or the monitoring officer with any queries about who to contact, because we appreciate that there isn't the same level. They haven't got a direct point of contact the way anyone in a group does. That was all I was just going to come back on.
Right. Before we go on to the training plan itself, I'd like to make some comments on the strategy document and the report. I pick up on 3.3 and quite a few more places through the document. We talk about developing the leadership capabilities of councillors, and I'm not really certain that we're talking about leadership. We're talking, I think, as Councillor Waller commented earlier, we're talking about the skills, capabilities, and understanding processes at this point in time, and even on the early phases of 2023 and 2024, it's that understanding that we're trying to develop rather than leadership capability. Now, there will be people who do need leadership capability, and we may want to have that as a separate item in the 23-24, but I just question whether leadership is the right word we want to use at this point in time. Do you want to come back on that, Maria, now at this point in time?
Well, we could, sorry, I've got my hand up. We could just take out leadership, although inevitably, but you are local community leaders. That's part of your role. And there's that role of, representing your communities, but also you are ambassadors for the council back. So it was leadership in that capacity. But I think we could take out the word leadership at this.
I think it could be
yeah.
confusing. I think if you say advocates for the community and the council,
Yeah,
that's the point you're making. You're advocates
Yeah.
for both parties. But I think in training terms, it's about developing that understanding, the knowledge, the skills, and
Yeah.
of the processes as well, the understanding of the processes, as Councillor Waller pointed out, that we're really trying to build here, particularly in the first phase of any training programme. I think Gail's mentioned the scrutiny, absolutely. The strategic changes, I think maybe the wording in the priorities are strategic changes, things like levelling up, devolution, maybe even the Prosperity Fund, maybe even the planning documents that are coming in the near future. So I agree with that. Moving on to the strategy document, the comments I had there, again, comments about leadership in paras 1.3 and 1.5, and in 2.2. In terms of the priorities, I'm being very granular about it. I saw there being really 3 big pieces of work to be done. Scrutiny, as I think Gail has already identified, I think Mark's identified, I'd written this down. There are 2 brand new members to council and 1 relatively new member to cabinet, 1 relative new member to cabinet as well. And I know from my experience that first few months were a very steep hill to climb in understanding A, your role, and B, what you could and couldn't do. And I think this, and I've said to both to Mark and to Rosemary, I'm more than happy to be a sounding board if you wish at any time. And I think there's an opportunity there as well, both in cabinet and external to cabinet, for support. So that was those points. I think I agree with the comment from Gail about the COVID-19. It seems to repeat itself a number of times. On item 3.2, the last sentence, talk about the budget. The budget will be managed by the governance team. Fine. In the future, the director, and again, it will be director of legal, will agree annually on any overriding priorities for the coming year with group leaders and determine the budget required to meet those priorities. This, to me, slightly contradicted the role of the commission, the Constitution Commission, which had the role of overlooking the strategy. So I just wondered how that sat with that particular role of the commission. Marie, do you want to come back on that?
Well, I think we can clarify that. I would see this body, the commission, and the fact of the matter is we have got group leaders on it, I think. So the commission would agree with the director overriding priorities and how the money's spent.
Good.
So I can make that change.
Excellent, thank you. So that's all the comments I've got on their strategy document. It's a very good piece of work. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to the training plan. This is now the specific training plan for the next 12 months, effectively, and slightly further beyond. I think, Gail, do you want to make a comment on that? Or do you want, sorry, Marie, do you want to just introduce that?
Well, it's not a very polished piece of work. We just wanted to see what have we got in the diary at the moment, so that it's a bit of a straw man, really, for you to comment on.
Okay.
I think it's
Sorry,
sorry for interrupting that.
Yeah.
I think the key thing to mirror as well is that it's not set in stone once it's written. It's open to change at any point. I think from looking at it, there's already a training course that a cabinet member is due to go on as well. That's only come up since this document was put together. So it's always subject to review. And if there are problems with it now, that doesn't mean that they can't be addressed, or that just because something isn't there now doesn't mean that it won't be on later in the year. Because, as I say, the intention under the strategy is for governance to, where our capacity is, to take a better role in looking at and signposting training for members as well, and making sure that they're aware of the opportunities. But that was all I was going to say at that point.
I mean, I think sorry, through you, Chair, we're just mindful of the pressures on members' time as well. There are only so many evenings in the diary, aren't they? And there's quite, you've got directors, but I hadn't realised these are weekly, that there's a director's briefing at the moment, which that does seem a lot to me, so there's all of that in the mix really, and how, you know, what's a reasonable program for, you know, a member to have to commit to. So I welcome your comments really on the whole thing.
Gail indicated, first of all, Gail, do you want to?
Thank you, Gordon. I hope that this training plan is a regular feature of both the formal and informal meetings of this group, so that we can see the dynamism in action. The member director briefings have actually been part of a discussion that the group leaders have had. So they may not stay as they are,
Right.
depending on how that progresses. I think the second one down is probably now July, the strategic overview, unless Tom is planning something that.
Well, there was something for the committee itself, and then there was, the thinking was, let's do something with the committee itself, but also let's do something for the whole membership.
Yeah, fine. The cybersecurity workshops, excellent, and they're free. But if we put them in this programme, can we make sure that governance is also emailing all members to tell them, even though I know they appear on the East Midlands Council's weekly thingy, but not everybody reads that. But if we're putting it in here as something people might be interested in, can we actually email as well separately, please, as a request? On the 24th of June, you've got the East Midlands Scrutiny Network, and the 4 is actually not accurate under the 4 column. The East Midlands Scrutiny Network is for all councillors who are not members of the executive, whether or not they are members of a scrutiny committee.
Oh, we can correct that. Yeah.
That's factually the case as per its terms of reference, which means in our case, as we have relatively few members of the scrutiny committee, nonetheless, if you're not on it, you can go to it. And I believe Gordon intends to. Do you not, Gordon? Yes.
My intention, as normal. Now
Yes.
that I'm no longer in cabinet.
Yes. The audit and risk training is accurate in the sense that it happens. I don't know what happens now with, or what will happen under Councillor Walters's chairmanship, but when I chaired it, that training, I opened it up to all members regardless. I offered it to all. Occasionally some non-members of the committee turned up as well. I think that's good practice because I think we should all know about audit and risk regardless of who we are. So I'd quite like to see that resurrected, but clearly Councillor Walters will be the final arbiter on that one, I would have thought.
Just to say on that, I do know that Councillor Walters has already gone out to the committee on that exact matter, following on from some of the work Councillor Powell had done in her previous year as the Audit and Risk Committee Chair.
Okay, thank you. 16th of September, you've got the East Midlands Councillor Development Network. That actually isn't for all councillors. That's the reverse of the scrutiny one. That's for the lead member and lead officer, or members and officers, depending on how many you've got, on councillor development. So I would have thought in our context, it would be chairman and vice chairman plus somebody from governance, not all of us, I would have thought in our context, but I have looked that one up, and so that's that. And then we've got East Midlands Scrutiny Network twice more, so it's the same comment as before. Thank you. I know I'm being a bit pedantic, but I am.
No, it's good. It's good.
Marie, do you want to comment on that?
Well, through you, Chair, I mean, this still looks like a very busy programme to me. And I'm just wondering, is there a rule of thumb? Should we just have one training development event a month, or should we have 2, or should we have unlimited?
Unlimited, because
Right.
not everybody is going to go to everything.
Okay. And then just picking up on a point someone made earlier about the hows, or was it the hows? So, how to ask a question at council, how to move a motion, rules of debate. Should we test the market on that and see if people would like some small sessions on you know, on call-in or?
It was me
Or-
who raised it, and I raised it as part of induction next year. It needs to be part of next year's induction.
Okay, all right, good.
Primarily for new members, though not exclusively.
So, I mean, on that, what I'd envisage is that we'd bring the looking at Tom, we'd bring the induction programme back to this group of members to have a look at an appropriate
Yeah.
time and get member input into the shape of that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Mark, are you, sorry, Gil, you finished with your comments? Thank you. Mark, on the programme.
Yeah, I'm talking about the programme, yeah. There's nothing about cabinet. It's all about scrutiny and committees. So I think we need scheduling somewhere. You know, I know scrutiny is very important and the East Midlands network is very important, but it would be good to get some training for cabinet as well, because we've got 2 new cabinet members, and as mentioned previously. This is the first time, as I say, I think that we've actually had a schedule of training offered to members, so that they can cherry pick what they are interested in and perhaps take part in. From what Marie, I mean, I take on board your concerns about, you know, there will always be some members who find it more interesting to do something else than do some training, and there will always be members who will be interested in doing the training. So I think it's just really a question of offering it to them and saying, if you wish, this is what's available. It's not about you will do it. It's about if you wish, you can do it. So I think we need to perhaps wrap it in those terms when we offer it to members. But there are certain things like the local plan we need to, members really need to be really get involved in that, and that's down to group leaders to stress the importance of that particular piece of training, and the same with planning, whereas because people cannot they cannot actually sit on the planning committee until they've had the training. And I don't know how many new members there are. Last or 2 weeks ago, the Monday full council. How many new members are there who are now on planning who weren't before? One.
Just one, and that member did receive training before the. I think it was the week before the committee.
Okay, so the bit of because I noticed it does say, it just says May planning committee training. So that's actually gone.
That's now happened. Yeah.
Okay, so it might be an idea to take out all those ones which are.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think this will be a living and breathing document. It's not set in stone. It wasn't set in stone the moment this was put together, because I've already mentioned there was actually a cabinet. There's a training session I know a cabinet member is going on soon. That's not included on the plan because it was identified and organised after the publication. So I envisage this as a rolling document.
Okay.
And then when we governance become aware of something new, then in whatever method we think best as a service, we'll make sure that members are aware of it. That might mean just simply renaming this document slightly and just regularly circulating it out to councillors as a reminder of what training is available to them.
Well, could it perhaps be put into the Teams calendar so that members, when they look on their Teams, they can see that it is actually available and they can factor it into their diary? That would be helpful. But like I say, I welcome the initiative. I think the more we know, the better, and the better rate we are to be able to make decisions. But I just wanted that clarification, and I would like to see a little bit more training for cabinet.
Thank you, Mark. Paul, have you got anything to add before I go back to Gil?
On training, I note what Marie says about the diary is pretty full. However, being on planning, even despite having professional sort of knowledge about it, there's still an awful bloody lot to learn. And the first training we had with Tim Leader, and we now had subsequent ones for individual members, and he's coming over again. I hesitate to think what Tim Leader's costs are for doing this. And I'm just wondering, despite your reservation, Marie, whether it would be useful having almost a further briefing every month on planning aspects, because it is quite clear there is a massive disconnect between certain members of that planning committee and what the officers' views and how they interpret things. And it is becoming almost a negative influence within that committee.
Oh dear.
And you can see the various people who from time, and yet are very demonstrative in their lack of knowledge, shall I say. And I'm being a bit harsh here. I see Gordon nodding with me.
You're being polite.
And I do actually think that some form of briefing would be terribly useful to discuss various things that comes up. It doesn't, it could be on individual set topics each month, like how the 5-year numbers are calculated, and why from last June we've not had any of the massive estates actually put onto our list, simply because of the various qualifications that have to happen. But it was quite clear, looking at some, this came as total shock to people 2 nights ago, and they looked quite askance at it, despite them being on the committee for many years. So I'm wondering, instead of just having to employ Tim Leader at enormous expense, although I think he is an exceedingly good and interesting character, particularly on the detail side, that it might be useful to consider having officers. I know their time is precious, and I appreciate that, but getting these things through getting matters rejected ad lib could be possibly help to be alleviated if there was more training and understanding between the council officials themselves and indeed the members. And I'd like that to be sort of put in and to be considered.
Before we go back to Gail, can I just run through the training program from my point of view? Very pleased with it. I think it's a very good start. The only comments I'd make is I don't really see directors' briefings as training. I see that very much as information exchange, and it's quite different. So I think there's a question mark against that on the list. I shall be attending the cybersecurity workshop, and interestingly, I was invited through my parish council for that as well. So in fact, it's quite a wide ranging invitation for that particular project, training program. Coming back to structural approach, I think coming back to Paul's point, there's a number of different ways that, or a number of different routes, pathways, I think they call it in the NHS, for training. And obviously the big one is induction at the beginning of a new session. And that is very structured, and it's very clear as to what happens during the first 3 months and thereafter, hopefully. I think this last 4 years, there was a very intense period of induction, and then it seemed to fall off very rapidly after 3 months. And I think that's what we have to watch. The new councillors will get up to speed, but then I think there needs to be reinforcement, because things will have been said which they will not have understood because of the jargon or whatever it might be and the processes. I think yes, I agree 100%. A very strong structured approach early, then coming back and building on that initial knowledge. Sorry, let me just mute that. So that's number one. The number two is the committee approach, and I think Paul's raised this, and Gail mentioned it in relation to the audit and risk. There's real opportunity for that half hour before a committee meeting, where, and I think Gail did it in audit and risk. I think it's very useful to have that raising of understanding, and we've done some work on risk assessment in audit and risk, or risk management on audit. So I think that is really useful, and I think those individual committees working at that and being encouraged to have the half hour before the meeting to do that particular work. And then there's the all councillor versions of training. It's not particularly training, but it's raising their knowledge base. And it's on things like the strategic matters, the local plan as Mark's raised, and on things like devolution, etc., national issues. So I think there's a real, we could almost break them down into that, and maybe other things about personal skills. There may be some have good chairing skills, obviously chairs, other chairs may not have those skills. So I think those are, we can maybe break them down and understand when we get to next year, particularly what training programs are required for which individuals.
Yes, we could, I mean, just to come back, we could almost colour code the, categorise them in the way you've suggested and colour code them in the plan.
So those are the points there. The only other minor point was adding on to this would be the format, and whether the format is a physical meeting or whether it's virtual, would be useful for members to know as well. Because if they look at something like the cyber security one, that is a virtual one. It's MS Teams. Also, you've got it down as method, but maybe the format, say physical at, whether it's at East Midlands or I know you got it down at Erewash for the other one. So it's just bringing that together to say that this is a virtual meeting through MS Teams, or it's a physical meeting at Catmus, or it's a physical meeting at some other location.
Yeah.
So that members can look at it and go, I can't afford the time away in that day, and therefore I can't do that particular one. So those were the comments that I had on that. Just coming back to Gail now, I think is.
I actually think Tom had his hand up first, Gordon.
Okay, sorry, Tom.
I was only going to say, without, again, this all comes down to these things being living and breathing documents. To come back to something Councillor Paul Brown said, I know there is an intention to put something together for all members of the planning committee, specifically on some of the things that you've mentioned that'd be beneficial for all members. And I can't recall if we were able to do this for the May meeting because we use a different trainer, but certainly for the Tim Leader training sessions, what we've always tried to do is put the training on for the new members that need it, and then also offer it out as a regular refresher, because Tim Leader in particular doesn't charge an extra cost if only several extra members attend from the planning committee. And I think there was nothing to come back on from what you said, Councillor Brown, other than take the point completely. I mean, certainly with regard to the structure of training and making sure we come back, I think an important thing we will do for the 23 to 24 member training is thinking of scheduling in something, even if it's just something in one of the smaller meeting rooms for the only for new members on, settling in, or something, a follow-up session on skills training, or now that you've been in the post for a few months, do you need any further information on motions, questions, anything like that?
I think the only problem you've got is that you get elected in May, and then you go away. There's this break. You have the annual council, and then there's a getting to know everybody, and then in the end of June, everything stops until beginning of September again, almost. It's a quieter time. So I think there's a point, I think, in September or just before September where you pick that up and say to people, right, okay, now that's what we said back in May and June. Now here we go. This is the real thing happening in September and October. Gail.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say I totally support what Gordon said, particularly in relation to half-hour training before the committee meetings. I mean, there are all sorts of things that planning could do that, and I would suggest not related to that particular agenda that night as well. Excuse me. Things like the interface between planning and licensing, which I only really thought about today, although I understand it. I hadn't actually thought about it until a ward issue came up that triggered my thinking. So those sorts of things. But in light of what Mark said, I think he's absolutely right. Training of the leader, cabinet, etc., needs to be there, particularly following an annual, an all-out elections where there are likely to be changes regardless. And I do know that Mark and I think possibly Rosemary are both going on some training, LGA based, and it did make me thinking about that perhaps this document needs to be in two parts. It needs to be circulated to all members every time we review it. But part one needs to be, this is training that we think you should go on, might want to go on, I would recommend. And so if you put in to go on it and there's a cost, you'll be treated favourably. And then the second part is, this is the training that's available, or agencies through which you can get training. If you want to do any of that, you will have to bid for the money through this process, whatever the process is. Bid is the wrong word. Apply is a better word.
Apply,
is a better word. So that people know where they are. That's my thinking on that.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple of points. First of all, we are bombarded with training emails every day. I get at least 10 saying, do this, do that, blah, 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 you know, come to see us in Outer Mongolia and, you know, we'll pay for the flight and you have a nice holiday on the way through. We do get that. So I think we need to have some sort of way of, and I also get a lot of stuff for chartered surveyors. So then I think it would be helpful if we had some way of blocking some of those unsolicited emails, which is offering training on how to be a good barrister, for example, which I've had on occasion. So because that does tend to muddy the water. We need, and this is the point I'm trying to make, and that's why I welcome this initiative, because hopefully it will enable members to see where they can go if they have specific and what is being offered to them, and what the process is in order to get that. And also we need to make a distinction, I think, between training and informing, because the members' briefings that directors give us is informing, and it's telling us what is happening within the department, and it can't really be classified as training, I don't think, because training goes a lot deeper than that, and because that's impacting on members' abilities to recognize what their role actually is and how they can do that role better through training. And again, going back to planning, there are a number of members who I think they've got a different view of what their role actually is as part of the planning process. And whilst they have, some will have some experience from outside of the council that they can bring in, like Councillor Brown, for example. Others will have what they've gleaned from the 11 years being on the planning committee or whatever. And there are some who just go, no, and that's it. So, and what we have to do is try and find perhaps see the reactions to members and specifically say to them, you know, it might help if you had a little bit more of an idea or a little bit more training on that particular area, so that we can bring them back in. Because at the end of the day, all officers are doing is what we are telling them to do as per policy. And many of them have their hands tied when it comes to outcomes. And there is not that much that we can do. So I think we need to be, the point I'm trying to make is that the training has to be focused on specific areas where perhaps we recognize that there are weaknesses in members' ability to, or strengths in members' abilities to actually help the direction of travel.
Okay, Tom.
I was just going to say, I mean, to come back to Councillor Oxley's point, I think the idea of this plan would exactly address some of those concerns. I mean, the governance inbox also gets a lot of the training emails that you probably get. I can't count the amount of times the governance inbox has been invited to attend a seminar on finance in local government that comes through. You know, and the idea is that they're putting together a regular circulation to members in some form or another, and putting it onto Teams acts as a filter for some of that stuff to help give members a more focused approach on what to come through. And obviously we do have the members planning code of good practice scheduled for this commission to reconsider, and that can be a good springboard from which to look at what we need to do with the planning committee in particular and their members.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for all that input. I think we've had a fairly good discussion on it. I hope the officers are happy with the input.
Thank you. Yes.
So where does it go from here? Obviously, you're going to rejig it in some way.
Yes,
council.
Yes, I'm suggesting it goes to the July Council, and what I can do on the back of the discussion today is make some changes, possibly show them as track changes, Chair, and then put it round the group for verbal comment. And then if we've got a final version, we'll take that on to July Council.
Excellent.
But thank you very much. I'm glad it's been well received. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all the hard work on that one. Fine, that's item 9. Item 10, no other urgent business identified as far as I know, not to the officers. Nobody's shaking their head. Is there any changes to our work plan because of discussions we had? I think we did say that we wanted to look at the training plan for next year, the induction program at some stage, and that may want to go onto the training program later in the year or early next year.
Yeah, I think we could probably look at the January meeting for that, maybe, because certainly I know from my perspective, it'd be good to get a very clear steer from members early on so that I can go ahead and start booking things in, because there will obviously be every other council in the country with elections wanting to put on the same things from the same providers.
Okay, so we would put in the induction program for January.
Yeah, and I think Councillor Waller is. Sorry, I was just going to say, Councillor Waller's also mentioned about this training plan, and perhaps we can just have a noting item at the end of the informal sessions just to note the current situation on the training plan.
Thank you.
And then that could always be the springboard on which it goes out to other members as well once the group leaders are, and that can
Good
be the
idea.
opportunity for the group leaders to review it, so it all gets tied up in one.
Lovely. Mark?
Yeah, just to say, I would urge caution when it comes to making any decisions on anything post next year's elections, because we don't know what the outcomes will be. I mean, it may be that every single member of the present council decides to go for re-election, and then so we have this exactly the same cohort of 27 arriving at Catmus in May. So I think, and I've always been a little bit hesitant about making any sort of plans post an election. So there would have to be a caveat attached to it that, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, operationally, officers would need to make finalisations and may have to change an individual date. We wouldn't be asking this commission to set me in stone and say that
Okay.
Governance has to use that particular provider on that particular day. We would need that flexibility. I mean, we would certainly we be thinking on themes, such as we would want to make sure there is a session for chairs.
Yeah.
There's a session on scrutiny. There's a session on planning, and then because Councillor Brown's mentioned, we do have a slight gap where there aren't as many meetings going forward, and governance can make sure that the programme of meetings for 23-24 that goes to annual council has space allowed for more training if the election results make clear that we need that extra capacity for training in members' diaries.
Thank you. And that answers my question. And I thought I should make that point. Thank you.
I think the key is we're looking at an induction program. We're looking at the scope of it, so it's available as and when required. And then that's the basis in which any by-elections can be built on as well moving forward, although they may be more condensed rather than the extended one you'd have for an all-out election. Okay, I think that covers it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all your time. And
I just have one more thing I'd like to say. I think, Marie, is this your last meeting?
it is.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I finish on Tuesday next week.
So I just wanted to thank you for all your hard work and
My pleasure.
and what you've brought to the council. Immeasurable. It really is.
Thank you.
I'm putting up with our little nuances here in Rutland. We are doing that.
No, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And I'm leaving you in Angela's good hands.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Marie. Thank you very much indeed for
Bye
all
now.
your input. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tom.